Hi guys, the Metal Maniac back again, and in this video I'm going to be doing a ranking of the Harry Potter movies from worst to best. So yeah, let's just begin. So coming in at 8th place, my least favorite Harry Potter movie, and I think the worst one, The Deathly Hallows Part 1. What I consider just a very unnecessary movie. So there's Part 1 and Part 2, right? Yeah, I mean, ever since the finale of the Twilight movies, when they did a part one and part two, ever since then, a lot of movie studios have had this growing obsession of making a finale of a franchise a part one and part two. I don't know why. Now I get for some things like it chapters 1 and 2 because technically they are two different things because they were from a book. And I get, the series is from books, but I just the way the movie was and the way the actual story is, the drastic time jump, I think that works. And there are other movies that do a part one and part two that work as well, but there are also a lot of other movies that don't. And the Deathly Hallows part one and two, and as well as the dumb Twilight movies, and the thing that basically popularized it. It was just unnecessary, and it's just a way for a movie studio to make even more money than they would if it was just one movie. And I know people make the argument of, oh, it's such a long book, they had to split it into two parts. Not really. I mean, for this movie, one of the main reasons I hate it, besides it's unnecessary, the reason why it's unnecessary is because there's not much that really goes on in this movie. Not much that's needed. I mean, yeah, sure, you have the beginning of the movie, everything getting ready, and then leaving the Dursleys and all that, and then the meeting. But there's a whole chunk, a lot in the middle of the movie. A lot of the middle of the movie is just unnecessary filler subplots and just action scenes, and just there's a lot of the middle of the movie that feels very unnecessary, and they could have cut out completely and had just the major stuff that needs to be in this movie, and then they could have just made one movie if they cut out a large chunk of the basically unnecessary bits that didn't need to be there. But yeah, this movie suffers a lot from having that sort of idea of, oh, we need to make a part one and part two because it makes more money, and them not seeing that they could have obviously just cut out some unnecessary bits and just made it one movie. But yeah, nothing really happens much in this one other than, again, the end and the beginning. Sorry, the beginning and the end of the movie. Number 7 is The Deathly Hallows Part 2. This one I do have problems with, but not for the same reasons as Part 1. First off, I just want to mention, for those who just sort of were, I guess maybe didn't really realize it, but as the movies went on, the less and less they became accurate to the books. Like, the first two movies in particular were super accurate to the books, but going forward, each movie going forward became less and less accurate to its book counterpart. And this probably has one of, if not the most, no, sorry, not one of, but this movie probably has the most inaccuracies to its book counterpart. For example, the Hogwarts battle. Well, yes, a lot of the battle took place outside of Hogwarts, inside of Hogwarts, around the grounds of Hogwarts and stuff like that. But in the book, the main part of the battle, Harry versus Voldemort and all that, took place in the Great Hall. But for some reason it takes place outside in the movie for some weird reason. And then also I have a problem with the fact that Voldemort's death was completely different, and it was way overly dramatized compared to the book. And there's a couple different moments in the series where something was unnecessarily overly dramatized. Basically, I guess you could say Voldemort was Thanos snapped out of existence because he just literally dissipates. He like his body sort of peels and flakes away and drifts into dust and drifts away and stuff like that. And yeah, people arguing that it's more cinematic, but it really loses its meaning because here's the thing: Voldemort's main purpose for why he does what he does is because he wants, other than because pretty much the he's pretty much against non-magic users or like half magic slash non-magic half wizards or whatever. What are they called? I forgot the term. But he's basically, yeah, sure, that's part of his main goal of everything. But also his other main goal is the fact that he was trying to be immortal because he's afraid of dying. But so it's basically his greatest fear is death, right? And the whole point in the book of making his death as mundane as possible was basically an insult to his fear of death. Basically, he just dies. He dies and falls to the ground, and that's basically it. There's no over dramatization. It's not a spectacle. It's as mundane as possible. And basically an insult to Voldemort's fear of death, and basically like, oh yeah, your death is meaningless. Your death, was nothing. But with the movie, they make it so dramatized and so spectacular. And that's basically, it loses the point of why it was such a mundane death scene in the books. Yeah, I mean, there's just a lot of inaccuracies and a lot of over dramatization in this movie that I just can't. I can't. I can't watch it without basically getting kind of irritated that it's just just done that way. In my opinion, just not as good as the book. All right. What am I? Number 8, 7. Number 6. Number 6 is, hold on, I have it here. All right. Number 6 is The Half-Blood Prince. This one is actually pretty good. I do really enjoy this one. It's not the greatest movie, but it's not the worst. I think the best parts of the movie is the hunt for the Horcruxes and Voldemort's and the continuation of Voldemort's backstory. I think those two aspects are done very well in this movie. But my problem comes down to everything else going on around those two plot points. Everything else going on around besides those two main things is just kind of boring and just isn't really that interesting. But I do like that movie for the main two for the main two reasons. And I can forgive everything else around it being boring because the main focus of the movie is there and is interesting. It's just I kind of wish there was a more interesting sort of everything going else around it, but it is what it is, and I can forgive this movie for that because everything else, the two main things are still good, and I really really like just the main plot. It's just really good. All right, number 5. Yeah. Okay, yeah, number 5. Number 5 is Order of the Phoenix. This one is it's closer to being a little bit more. I wouldn't say a perfect movie, but it's closer. But my main reason why I absolutely love this movie is not only the whole aspect of, the Ministry doesn't believe that Voldemort's back, so we have to try to convince them somehow. I also love the overall sort of story element of, in this movie, Harry's sort of like in turmoil and like mental turmoil. Like he's trying to deal with like his sort of place. Like so, in the past movies, yes, Harry knew that he had a connection to Voldemort, but he didn't really think about it that much. It didn't really bother him until the events of this movie, where his connection of Voldemort got someone he knew severely injured. Like his connection to Voldemort's pet snake Nagini. He saw it attack Ron's dad. And yeah, sure, like it was a you know a way for Voldemort to try to get Harry, um, or at least it was unintentional at first, but then Voldemort realized there was a connection there. But it was basically sort of yeah, sure, it was sort of like just a thing that happened because of what was going on. But Voldemort sort of used it to his advantage to try to get Harry to, being lured into his trap. But like the whole thing, like as Harry saw it, like he sort of like started second guessing himself, like, am I the chosen one? Am I really good? Like, how come I have a connection to I seemed like I thought I was the snake that attacked, Ron's dad, and he's sort of like dealing with all this emotional trauma and him second guessing himself and just his place in the wizarding world. And I just love how they were able to portray that in this movie, and how they were able to get in the imagery as well, like just the whole thing of Harry trying to come to terms with what's happening, and him trying to sort of try to find a way to reaffirm that yes, he's not bad. Yes, he's meant to stop Voldemort. And even though these things are happening, he needs to not he needs to address them, but at the same time not sort of overly torment himself with all this kind of thing. And I just love that sort of aspect of this movie, and it's just done super well. And the action scenes are great as well, and the ministry thing. The only thing I really wish was in the movie that didn't really make the cut for obvious reasons. It's an unnecessary scene, but I find it kind of funny. In the book, there's this funny scene where when they were going through the different doors in the rooms in the ministry, Ron, I think, if I remember correctly, Ron accidentally bumps into like a tank filled with creatures, and it's these like jellyfish brain looking things, and one attaches to his head, and sort of like it almost seems like it sucks out the smartness of his mind, and he becomes this very sort of like mumbly idiot, and then he like starts going this hilarious sort of nonsensical rant, and it's just super funny. Yeah, sure, it's a quick scene and technically unnecessary for the movie, but it is very funny, especially if you listen to the audiobook and the narrator is able to make it even more funny than just reading what's going on. You can listen, and he just does a great job. But I really wish that scene was in the movie, but I could understand why it was cut, because it wasn't really necessary. But yeah, it's just a really, really good movie. Alright, number 4. Number 4 is Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. Okay, at first, when I first watched this movie, I did not like it, and for a long time I didn't. But over time, like the past like couple of years, it's grown on me more and more, and now I actually really like it, despite it's some of its flaws and stuff. Now the reason why I didn't like it originally was because compared to the first two movies, it took a drastic turn. Like, yeah, sure, the first two movies had their dark moments, but this is even more so, and it kind of loses a little bit more of that whimsical sort of fantasy feel that the first two had. And yeah, there's still some of that in here compared to, the stuff later on, especially the last, like, three movies where there's the fantasy element, but it's not like the fantastical whimsy sort of like kind of thing. But yeah, I mean, despite that, and yeah, sure, I didn't like it. Everything was a little bit too different, and the set design was drastically different from the first two movies because the original director didn't come back. And there were some things that didn't really make any geographical sense, especially the placement of Hagrid's hut in this movie, and then a couple other movies, like it changes a bit. Yeah, despite those flaws, and despite me despite the reason for me hating this movie, I know I just sort of been able to overlook that, and now I absolutely love this movie. I love the Marauders map idea. I love the character of Sirius Black and how he was sort of like it's sort of a switcheroo. Like you think he's bad, they make him out to be this villain, but then it turns out he's not the villain, and he was actually framed by Peter Pettigrew. And I love the way they were able to do that, and it's like it is done in a very convincing way that it legitimately is convincing. Like, oh, this guy is the villain, because a lot of movies don't really do that very well. It's not very convincing, and it's kind of obvious of the plot twist. But this is done very well. I also really like the fact that this movie doesn't have Voldemort. This is the only Harry Potter movie that Voldemort's not really an actual threat in here. He's not an actual villain. And well, that at first kind of seems weird. It kind of makes sense considering what Voldemort isn't really like he was just completely he's still recovering from before, and he's just gaining his power, and he's not really there yet in terms of ability to actually do anything much. So I guess it makes sense for the villain to be someone else, and really the main villain of this movie is Peter Pettigrew basically. And I also love Lupin. Lupin is probably one of my favorite characters of the entire franchise. And well, the werewolf design is kind of weird. How he's like very like he has basically almost no fur and very like frail looking. In terms of in terms of the actual like effects, the effects look really good. And I love the werewolf sound effects too, like the way just the overall grunts and howls and stuff like that are done very very well, too. I even like certain set designs, like the Shrieking Shack is probably my favorite set design of the entire movie. I even used to have a Lego set of that at one point, which I don't anymore, unfortunately, and now it's like very expensive to buy. Yeah, a lot of the set designs are not that good, especially the change of the castle set design. But the Shrieking Shack and some other stuff is really good as well. Yeah, overall, even though I didn't like this movie to begin with, and for a while I didn't like it, it's really grown on me in recent years, and now I think it's one of the best movies. Number 3. Number 3 is Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. This one is probably the best of the of the what I call the transitional movies, where it was transitioning from the first two. Even like I said, the first two had some dark moments, but they're more sort of relegated to the side, not the side, but they were sort of like moments that were sort of intertwined with the more whimsical, fantastical sort of style of the the wizarding world, and it's sort of like that kind of thing. Whereas the more fantasy, but like the more dark fantasy kind of aspect, kind of thing. But with Prisoner of Azkaban and this one, I call them the transitional period, where it's transitioning from the more fantasy oriented kind of thing, and in terms of the lighthearted, whimsical kind of fantasy, to the more dark, gritty kind of fantasy. This is probably the best of the two, and it's done really, really well. Yeah, sure, it's a lot darker. There's not much of the that other kind of thing, the lighthearted, whimsy kind of fantasy, but it's still an important movie in sort of the transitioning to the more darker era of the Harry Potter franchise. I also really, really, really like the set design. I think the castle set design and then the overall set design of everything else is done way better than in Prisoner of Azkaban. Also another great, I think a lot of these Harry Potter movies, most of them in fact, do really, really well with plot twists. Like plot twists that you don't see coming. And yeah, the plot twist of Barty Crouch Jr. being actually being disguised as Mad Eye Moody the entire time is genius. I really like how they were able to pull that off. And you don't even, yeah, sure, Polyjuice Potion technically was already introduced to the series in the second movie, but you don't really think that, oh, this guy is drinking a lot because he has to keep drinking Polyjuice Potion. You just think he's like, you just think that, oh, well, he has some drinking problems, perhaps. But yeah, I mean, it's just covered up so well. I also really like my favorite part of the entire movie is the graveyard duel. I really really like that. It's just done so well. And I don't know, I don't remember if it was in the books or not, but I love the sort of the locking spell kind of thing where like both Harry and Voldemort were like were trying to get at each other, but like the spell sort of not backfired, but sort of rebound off each other, and like the ghosts of all the people Voldemort killed sort of like temporarily were able to manifest and help Harry. Excuse me, had a hiccup there. So it sort of help Harry to get out of there, get out of trouble and stuff like that, and basically stay alive to be able to return to Hogwarts and stuff like that. It's just done really, really well. But yeah, overall, a fantastic movie. All right, number two. Number two is Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. This is one of the two Harry Potter movies that are like part of my childhood. Like, also even before I even saw these movies, these two, the first two I didn't see in theaters. I saw I think the year or the either the year or before the year. Like, I saw these movies before Prisoner of Azkaban was released, but not while the first two movies were in theaters. There was like so that gap in between is when I saw them. Sometime around like that, like around probably when was the when was Prisoner of Azkaban again? 2004. So I might have seen it like sometime in 2000, like either sometime in 2003, or 2004, but before the movie came out, before Prisoner of Azkaban came out. Although I think it might have been 2003. That does sound. That sounds pretty correct. But yeah, I mean, even though I didn't see these in theaters, these did shape my childhood. Like these first two movies, and so it was really like, I mean, it wasn't that hard, but it was kind of hard to like sort of like think which one I like more. Originally, but the past couple of years I've grown to like one a little bit more than the other. But so Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone is one of my favorite movies from my childhood. And it's perfection. Like this and the second movie are almost completely accurate to the books. Like, yeah, sure, there were certain scenes that were in the books that weren't in the movie. But the scenes that did make it into the movie were almost entirely accurate to the books. Both dialogue, both the dialogue, the sets, the aspects of the details of the sets, the clothing, even down to the accuracy of Hermione's hair. Even in the second movie, they didn't really get it quite right, but in the first movie, they were able to get it right. Just the very specific hairstyle, like it's not as noticeable. If you I mean, it's not super noticeable, but like if you remember how her hair was described, it's a little bit more accurate in the first movie than the second movie. But yeah, they were able to get a lot of details, even the tiniest of details, like almost completely accurately. I think this and the second one are like as accurate to their book counterparts as any could be. In terms of the Harry Potter franchise. And I really, really, really absolutely love the score of this movie. I really have to get it. I don't know if it's on vinyl or not, but I really, really want it. If it's not, it should be, because it's great. It's one of the most iconic movie scores of all time, in my opinion. And everyone in this movie does a fantastic job. And Richard Harris is my preferred Dumbledore. He's the more accurate one to the books. Like, he's supposed to be this, like, calm, collected, old sort of wise man wizard type of thing. And only when absolutely necessary, he goes from that to, and later in the books, whenever he absolutely needs to, he could switch gears and be this badass sort of like a powerful wizard that can defeat you very easily and that kind of thing. But yeah, I mean that's not really in the first two books, so I understand why that's not there in the movies. But I think even with the later iteration of Dumbledore, the other actor, he doesn't do the more humble, wise old man type of bit as well as Richard Harris did. Um, but yeah, he does a great job. Of course, the main cast: Rupert Grint, um, Danielle Radcliffe, and I forgot her name. I always forget her name. What's her name again? Emma Watson. Yeah, there we go. Emma Watson. The main cast does a great job. Everyone, and then also I absolutely love, again, my one of my favorite things about these two movies is the set design. Again, I just mentioned that. I just want to mention it again because it's just so good. And even the guy who played Professor Quirrell slash Voldemort in this movie does a fantastic job as both. Like for years and years and years, because I just didn't pay attention to the credits for some reason. I did not realize that the guy who played the face of Voldemort and the guy who played Quirrell were the exact same person, because he just does it so well to where it's very very believable that they're two different people, and he just does a great job. Um, I even used to have a Professor Quirrell action figure that if you like turned his turban up and turned his head around, it was Voldemort's face. I think I might have that figure somewhere. I just don't know where. I know I had to rebuy it at one point because I lost the original one. But anyway, but overall, this is a fantastic movie. Just not my number one. My number one, of course, is The Chamber of Secrets. This one takes everything about the first movie and ups it. Like does it even more so. Even the score is probably, I'd say, equal to the first one, but everything else is even more, is even better than the first one. The action scenes, the tension, the set design is even more so, especially the Chamber of Secrets set. That's awesome. I even have the original Chamber of Secrets Lego set. It's on a shelf on the other end of my room. But yeah, I mean, it's just a fantastic movie. I think this is the perfect Harry Potter movie and the best. There's just so much that I love about this, even down to the design of the basilisk, which the basilisk went through surprisingly so many different design changes over this course of the development of this movie. Like you could go into the special features and see how many different designs there were for the basilisk. Just concept art and stuff like that. It's really amazing. And there's some that I wish would have been made, but I do really like the final design as well. Also, this movie has a really good combination of CGI and practical effects, especially like again with the basilisk. Now the Aragog thing, the giant spider was 100% animatronic, practical effect, physical effect. But the basilisk, they cleverly were able to combine. The one of the discs popped out. Hold on. I'm gonna need to get a new copy of this. The disc holder for the second disc is broken. I really hope I could find the version with this case because I really like these cases. I really wish they continued with these going onward, but they didn't. Anyway, with the basilisk, like they built a physical animatronic. The first, head, neck, and then the first main portion of its body. But then from the middle portion to the end of the tail was all CGI, and then they used CGI to make extra little like details on the basilisk, like the glistening scale, like the glisten of the scales and the basilisk sort of slimy saliva and stuff like that. All of that was CGI, but like the actual main animatronic, the first half of the basilisk, and was all physically there. It was all animatronically done. And yeah, it's just everything about this movie was done absolutely perfectly, and I absolutely love it. And it's my number one. Alright, so that's it for this video. Hope you guys enjoyed, and I will see you next time.